What's up, y'all? It's Carla, aka Cla the Poet. How y'all doing? So I decided to do a live on deconstruction. Um, there are reasons why I am deconstructing my Christian faith. I've been doing it for the past couple of years after doing a deep dive into Christian history. So there was a man named Kevin Adele who owned the Word Network, a Christian TV station. And then September 19th, 2019, he sent a text message with a photo of himself dressed like a pimp, surrounded by black clergymen who he deemed his hoes. Okay? It's this type of racist and, degradation that it makes me not want to touch certain evangelical religions with a 10-foot pole. Okay? So, as I said in another one of my lives, religion, politics, and culture tend to intersect, and they affect each other. So, I'm going to give an example of how religion and politics started intersecting each other as well as culture. So there was a case called Hosanna Tabor versus EEOC in 2012. And what happened is that a man named Tucker spoke out at a chapel meeting in opposition to racism that was going on at a local school. The Black and Latino students were being taunted with racial slurs, and students dressing up in KKK hoods mock executing minority students and bullying these students. So the school, which was obviously may have been mainly white, the parents saw this as an attack on whiteness, complained, and he was fired. This ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court. And what ended up happening was that I think it went in the favor of those white parents, right? They came up with a term called ministerial exception, where religious institutions, right? Religions and institutions basically have control over who they employ and who they can fire, and can fire them for discriminatory reasoning. Okay, so basically the Supreme Court basically, stood up and made an exception and gave a justification for what these white parents, complaining, and this man being fired when honestly he had the freedom of speech to speak out against racism. Okay, but then the Supreme Court, this becomes political because it goes to court, and the Supreme Court ends up being biased and ends up making this rule so that they can basically discriminate in these private institutions. Okay, all right. So in Minnesota, a town approved a permit for an all-white church called Asatru Folk Assembly in Murdoch. Okay? And the Proud Boys attacked and vandalized property of the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church in December 2020 because its congregations supported Black Lives Matter. So do you see how religion, politics, and culture intersect each other? When someone has racist or white supremacist views, it will affect the politics that they support, okay? And it will even affect the context of the religion that they claim to support, okay? Let's go further. There was a group called the Deacons for Defense and Justice, okay, that was formed back in the day. I don't know the year. If you want to look it up, please do your own research. The reason why the Deacons for Defense and Justice were formed because the cops wouldn't protect the black citizens from the KKK and the KKK's attacks and harassment. Okay? Yeah. So let's continue to talk about things in history that most people don't know. Okay? So in 1925, the KKK attends a funeral at the Methodist Episcopal Church in Vinton, Iowa, right? Of Myrtle Underwood Cook, who was the president of the local Women's Christian Temperance Union, okay, and head of Benton County, which was the women's division of the KKK. Now, do you see how your religion, your politics, and your race and culture intersect each other in these examples that I just spoke about? Okay? They affect each other, and people would be very, very ignorant to think that they do not. You cannot compartmentalize these things because each one of them, it ends up affecting one another. Let's talk about 1961, the attack on the Freedom Riders, John Lewis and James Werg. These two men and others were beaten unconscious, right, by 500 people in a white mob. And most of those people in that white mob were regular churchgoers. Okay? So these are the type of things that we need to confront. This is the type of history that people are trying to hide. Okay? But the truth cannot be hidden. The truth cannot be hidden. It's always going to come out. Let's also talk about Episcopal Bishop William White. He became vice president of the American Colonization Society in 1819. The American Colonization Society, okay, was made up of slave owners and abolitionists. Okay? The ACS was originally founded by a man named Dr. Robert Finley in 1816. The point of this group, right, was to send blacks and slaves back to Africa. I think the country that they wanted to send them to was Liberia, so that they can have a place, to call their own, as well as, they can have land and, basically it was their way to try to appease their own consciences because of slavery. Some of these people were Puritans, right? Some of these people were Puritans. And so the institution of slavery was making them question their own consciences, right? Because of how horrible, the institution of slavery was, and the experiences and stuff like that. So to appease their own consciences, they started to try to ship people back to Africa. And for me, it's just the audacity of these people. You kidnap these people, you go and take them from their homeland, and now you gain a conscience and you want to send them back. These are some of the reasons why I deconstruct. Okay? These are just some of the reasons why I continue to deconstruct. Peace.